It's like the holidays around here. Usually my projects start with me getting some supplies in the mail. Here I was getting some refills for my gray markers. I also picked up some white pens I saw on the net and decided to try out. Here I am unpacking my first set of colored Copic markers. I watched plenty of YouTube videos, made an assessment, picked 54 colors, and ran with it. Hopefully these will get me through for a while. As you already know, I went ahead and penciled the drawing, inked it, scanned it, and printed it in non-photo blue so I could color it. I decided to start with the YouTube button, and after looking at the colors that I had, I went with the Sharpie red because I thought it was the brightest color I could find for a base. Then for the shading, I used cool gray markers starting with a C5, then a C3 and a C1 in that order. I started the blending process, and for the little button in the center, the triangle, I used a base of a C0. Then I shaded in with a C1 and darkened it a little bit with a C3 and a touch of C4. As for the outside frame, I started with a C0, C1, then I went to a C3 and a C5 to give that chrome effect. Then I used a Prismacolor black PC935 to blend it in, and for the button to give it a better look, I used a PC924 and PC923. Then I moved on to the circle. I wanted to offset the white of the paper, so I went ahead and used a C1 on the circle. To be honest with you, I thought that since it had less pigment on the ink, it would be easier to handle, but I ran into a lot of streaking, and it took me a long time to even out. It was about 4 passes before I got it right. Here I'm continuing with the shadow for the number 100, and I went with a cool gray C4, mainly because I've been reading about color theory, and I just read somewhere that shadows were blue, not black. Who would have thought? Here you also see me darkening the 100. To me it didn't look dark enough, so I gave it another pass with a Sharpie marker to make it nice and black. For the main figure I was a little nervous, so I looked at a lot of pictures. It's my first marker color rendering, and I'm doing it on the net. No pressure, no pressure. Okay, for the top of the kimono, I went with a base of a FBG2 using B05 for the darker areas. And for shadows, I actually used cool grays C4, C6 in order to accent the darker tones. Also, I had to make some correction on the sleeves. When I drew it, I wasn't really paying attention, so I had to reroute the way the fabric looked against Usagi's arms, and I went ahead and used a C9, which was dark enough to cover that mistake. To add a little texture to the kimono top, I used a black PC935, a base of a blue PC919, a PC1022, a PC903, and then to put it all together, I did the dot with a black Sharpie marker. I continued working on the sashes and the undershirt using warm grays. I used a W2, and all the darker areas were done with a W4. And to tie it all together, I used a Prismacolor pencil PC1074. Moving on to the swords, the sayas were done in grays. I used C2, C3, and C4 for deeper shadows, C5 and C6. Tied it all together with a PC1061. I also used that on the buttons. For the handles, I used FYG2 and a G17 Copic, and I did the details with a PC909. The metal part of the handles were colored with a Y00, Y06, Y35, Y26, E25, and for shadows I used a C4. For the highlights I used the Sigma Uniball broad tip white pen. Usagi was colored using a base of C0. For shading, C2, C4, tied in together with a PC1060 Prismacolor pencil. The eyes were left intentionally white using C2 for shadow The pupils were colored with a YR04. Now that you've seen my process, I would like to ask you, would you like to see these videos in the real-time format? If so, drop me a message in the comment section. Well, now we've reached the end of the video. Once more, thank you for spending a little time with me. My name is Rick Bonilla, and have a great day.